Hello, my name is Matt Cody, President and founder of Oil and Gas Workers Association. Welcome to our first podcast. We've got a great guest joining us first tonight. Tim, tell us who you are, a little bit about what you do.
My name is Tim Enlow. Basically, right now I'm a security professional, U.S. Army vet, and spent about 12 years in law enforcement. But here for the last about 4 years, I've been head of security for a media company.
Sure. So I reached out to you this weekend. First of all, thank you for joining us. I reached out to you this weekend because I've seen one of your posts on Facebook where you were reporting from the border and the border crisis. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing down there.
Yeah, so I spent 3 weeks down at the border now, and let's just get straight to the point. What I'm seeing is without a doubt, I mean, we've documented all this on video, is a government-run importation pipeline of illegal migrants.
And now that you mentioned that, I saw one of your posts this evening talking about how they're being bussed all over the United States. Is the Biden-Harris administration importing a new wave of immigrants?
Yeah, and I want people to know this is not like political. This is not like, I'm not saying this because I don't like Democrats, or I'm not saying this because I'm telling you, I spent 3 weeks on the border. If you go to my page, you'll see dozens of video where we recorded this. Yes, the Biden administration is importing or allowing tens of thousands a month of illegal migrants to come into the United States without documentation, without visas, without an immigration hearing date, without an asylum hearing date.
Right. The other reason I reached out to you is that in one of your posts you had mentioned how oil and gas workers, which is who Oil and Gas Workers Association represents, how oil and gas workers have been evicted from their man camps, from their hotels, and that the current administration was spending maybe 15 times as much as what the oil and gas workers were to house these illegals. What all do you know about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg. I mean, and I used to work, I spent about 2 years in the oil and gas industry. And so I definitely, I have a lot of respect for you guys. And I'll tell you what you guys are experiencing right now is the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be a whole lot more Americans being kicked out to make room for these illegal migrants. And again, I'm not saying that as a cliche. I'm telling you that we have documented proof that homeless people are being kicked out of charities to make room for illegal migrants. Oil workers are being kicked out of man camps to make room for illegal migrants. Convention centers are now being closed off to normal convention center use to be converted for illegal migrants because, folks, the dam has burst. Okay, this is no longer like a surge. This is a flood of humanity pouring across our southern border unchecked, and in numbers we've never seen in history before.
Some of your video, and is it all right for me to give your last name so that people can
Sure,
check
absolutely.
out?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
I didn't want to give your last name and people go looking for your post if you didn't want them out there, but I know that you're trying to get the message out, and that's why I approached you. Your video, by the way, Tim Enlow, Enlow. Y'all check out his videos on Facebook. One of the ones that I saw this weekend, you have footage from the McAllen Airport, I believe.
Right, I do.
And if I remember right, that is the Biden-Harris administration packing a bunch of illegals onto these planes and flying them all over the country. Where are they going?
Well, the 730, so they're chartering 737 aircraft, the ones we filmed, and they're trying to be real sneaky about it. They bring in unmarked chartered 737s. We tracked them down. They belong to Aero Airways, which is AERO.
Okay.
And they bring them in on the private side of the McAllen International Airport, right? Not where the main terminal is, but on the private side, they have the planes go all the way down to the end of the runway, park them in between hangars where it's very difficult to get any kind of footage of that. Sure. And then they bring in usually three big charter buses at a time with the Homeland Security seals on the side, full of illegal migrants, put them up there. The planes we tracked just last week were going to Midland, Texas.
Midland, Texas, from in the south. We've talked about oil and gas workers, and obviously that's the organization that we run and that we fight for is oil and gas workers. So one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on is that it's all connected. So with oil and gas workers being evicted from man camps and hotels, and then illegals being placed here in residences, the Biden-Harris administration is placing them here. How many would you say at this point? Hundreds per plane? How many are held on a 737?
737, you're looking at easily between 120 to 130 seats, right? That you can configure a 737 at. So minimum that, but multiple flights per day. And again, I want to make clear, I just documented 3 weeks in McAllen, Texas. That's one town. But if you saw that article I just posted, another news organization did a story on Del Rio, Laredo, where the buses are rolling nonstop. And somebody actually contacted me and said, hey, by the way, Tim, you did a great job documenting everything, all the traffic going through the McAllen International Airport of illegals. But don't forget, they're doing the buses from McAllen too. And we saw them taking illegals over to the bus station, but literally we just couldn't be in multiple places at one time.
It's interesting. No, I'm sorry. I apologize for cutting you off. It's interesting that you say that. When former President Trump was talking about erecting a wall across the entire southern border, I remember having a discussion with someone who said, well, we don't need a wall in all places because all the drugs come in through the ports of entry. So it's possible that may not be true, huh?
That's absolutely not true. Okay. Those drugs right now, first of all, the drugs are flowing across freely. So the price of drugs ought to be dropping here pretty quickly, because I tell you what, the babysitting duties that the Border Patrol has now been given to deal with this human flood coming across our border, drugs is the least of their concerns right now.
Now, since we're talking about drugs, and since we're talking about the free flow of stuff across the border, there seems to be a recent and seemingly inexplicable rash of mass shootings in America that the media is focusing on, right at a very inconvenient time when Democrats are pushing unconstitutional anti-Second Amendment legislation. If drugs are coming across the border unchecked, is it possible guns could be too?
Absolutely. And there, listen, if you follow a pattern, right, and you can go back in history and look at this is not me making this up. People don't have to take my word on it. There's a pattern here, and it's a really easy pattern to discern and apply to other countries that have fallen or failed. And that is, it starts usually with censorship, right. Then it goes to disarmament, right, and then it goes to total government control. And we are right now right between stage 2 and stage 3. It's coming, and that's why they are allowing millions literally of illegals to come across, because they look at it like, first of all, more votes, but more importantly, that a permanent underclass is much easier to rule than these uppity gun owners who actually stand up for their rights.
How dare they? I mean, how dare people listen to the words that say shall not be infringed? Of course, maybe no amendment is absolute, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you listen to them, yeah, it's all just interchangeable, or we can take one piece out, put the piece in we like, and yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely nuts what's going on right now, and I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime. That's for sure.
Nor have I. And obviously, the policies of several presidencies have led to this. Do you think that in the last administration, former President Trump's administration, do you believe the Democrats obviously were working against him because they envisioned this, because this was a plan? Is this what they wanted all along?
Oh, listen, the Democrats, from what I've seen, say what you want about them, right? Like I see a lot of people call them libtards and this and that, but I'll tell you what, that does a disservice to them, because I tell you what the Democrats have and what the Republicans lack. The Democrats have a strategy, and it's a multi-year, multi-decade strategy for 10, 20, 40 years down the road. And they have been playing by that strategy since the 1960s. Okay. And the Republicans keep playing the next election cycle. They're playing a short game, and the Democrats are playing the long game. And if we don't turn that around, we're going to lose this country.
It's very interesting that you put about a 60-year timeline on it, going back to the 1960s with the Democratic Party. It sounds like somebody else that I can think of whenever we talk about the Belt and Road people in China and their long-term plans. And, whenever we look at Chinese investment in oil and gas in America, and then, of course, we talked about China's investment in Iran and their 25-year deal for oil and gas, and then funding oil and gas interests around the world. The Democratic Party sounds a lot like China.
Well, and that's a really good point. And I'll tell you, I think you hit it right on. You hit the nail right on the head. That and it's really our whole government, right? We lack a coherent, long-term, worldwide strategy, and our enemies, like you mentioned, China being the primary one, but also Russia and some other countries. They stick to their long-term visions. Even if a different administration comes in or there's a change of power, the overall plan doesn't really change, because they're all on board with it. They may not, they may have their ideological differences as far as power and things like that. But when it comes to their goal for their enemies, their vision doesn't change, and that's why they're surging ahead and we're falling behind.
You brought up a very interesting point while ago, talking about easier to rule a poor class, and that may be why the Democrats are importing a new generation, right? Do you think that more and more policies in America, so largely oil and gas has been a partisan issue where it has been largely Democrats who have railed against it and spoken about this climate change. And then it has been largely Republicans who have been pro-American oil and gas jobs.
Right.
When you talk about having a poor class that's easier to rule, and the Democrats currently importing illegals, do you think that it may be because Democrats are increasingly identifying more with Republican economic policies and saying, hey, wait a minute, what we've been supporting all these years, they don't actually make sense?
Oh, I think at some of the upper levels, and I'm not talking about the politicians, but you're right. I think that the upper echelon of liberals in this country, they're getting nervous as well, and they're letting their politicians know. But the problem is the politicians don't want that, right? They want to hold on to that power, and so they're basically now turning their backs even on their liberal base, so to speak, right? And so now, like you said, they're bringing in a whole new base, right? People that are going to be beholden to people like AOC and things like that, and she's gonna beat that divisiveness drum, and let everybody know how racist we are, and yet millions flooding across our border right now.
Right. I didn't realize how racist I was until I read LeBron's tweet earlier that he later deleted.
Yeah.
I know whenever I think of role models, politically, LeBron flopping James is probably the last person I think of.
Yeah, but you know what? You don't. But unfortunately, now we're dealing with a generation who grew up on Twitter and grew up on Facebook, and what they see on Facebook and on Twitter is absolute. And so when their hero says, hey, this is what I think, that's what they think.
Right. And it's not that American voters and that, millennials and then the Generation X. It's not that the people currently in high school who are really starting to get interested in politics, or maybe even junior high. It's not that they're stupid. It's that the people that they listen to have really led them into some bad policies.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But it's a conditioning, right? It's just like wearing a mask, or even though, like people, you see people walk around in bright sunlight with not a person around them within 100 yards, and they're wearing their mask, right? It's
Right.
right. They've been conditioned now to wear that mask. It's no longer about science. It's about that they've been conditioned. And the same applies to those who follow people on Facebook and follow people on Twitter, and look up, and put these people on pedestals like athletes and stuff that really don't have the first clue what they're talking about.
Now, all of your reporting from the border is just fascinating. It's fantastic footage and fantastic rights. So your post tonight was talking about how these illegals are being bussed all over the place. Are they under guard?
No, 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 no. Once they're put on the buses, once they're put on the planes, they're free. They are free to go. And like I said, we watch them, take them. In fact, they're free before that. If you notice in my reporting in McAllen, it mirrors exactly what this other news agency reported in Del Rio, and that is they take them to these COVID testing sites, right? And so once the Border Patrol takes these illegals to the COVID testing site, they wash their hands of them. At that point, Border Patrol no longer has anything to do with them. Whether those people test COVID positive or whether they test COVID negative matters not to the U.S. Border Patrol. It matters not to the U.S. government. The only difference between the two groups is the ones that test positive go to a hotel for 7 days and
Okay.
are asked to stay there. There's no guard, there's no supervision. And the ones who test negative get to go on a plane right away.
Are you telling me that people who crossed our border illegally are given a COVID test, and then if they test positive, they're asked nicely to quarantine?
Well, yeah, they're literally transported. In the case of McAllen, in Del Rio, it's a different charity, but in McAllen, it's the Catholic charity picks them up from the COVID testing site, picks the positive ones up from the COVID testing site in an unmarked van. We followed that unmarked van to the hotel. We interviewed the van driver, we interviewed the hotel clerk, and they confirmed 100%. Yes, 7 days. They stay at the hotel. If they don't develop any serious symptoms, then at that point they rejoin the pipeline to get taken to a city of their choice.
But okay, so you mentioned Catholic Charities, and I saw that there was a sister of Pimentel the other day. She looked to be, I don't know what's the word, colluding with Vicente and Kamala Harris. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have news footage of the head of Catholic Charities USA meeting with Kamala Harris, the vice president. We have Sister Pimentel, who runs the whole Rio Grande Valley, pretty much. They're the Catholic Charities down there, meeting with top level Democrats there, and this is not accidental. The government is funneling billions of dollars through these charities, through these faith-based charities, and knowing that those faith-based charities are then in charge of transporting the illegals into the interior of the United States.
January 6th, President Trump, former President Trump, so the Democrats railed that his words, incited the insurrection. Have President Biden and Kamala Harris and Speaker Pelosi and AOC and some of these representatives who have encouraged illegals to come here, are their words just as powerful, and should they be held just as accountable?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a little baffled right now, and not just let's take a step back from January 6th. Let's talk about a president who was impeached over what we now know was a bogus dossier, right? The Steele dossier, and he was impeached for Russian collusion when there was no evidence of Russian collusion, right?
Well,
but just a mere accusation and a false dossier provided by Hillary Clinton, by the way, by her people, to the FBI, right, was enough to launch impeachment. Well, my question is, where are all the Republicans right now as the Democrats are transporting millions of illegal migrants across our border and helping them get to cities throughout the United States.
Right. And let me tell you, one of our favorite, my personal favorite in Congress, Congresswoman Yvette Harrell from out in New Mexico. In fact, she filed a discharge petition to immediately go back to immediate deportations rather than bringing them here into the United States. So we get to meet with her soon and looking forward to that chat. I know that there are some Republicans who are trying to fight back against these policies and trying to force Congress's hand and trying to force President Biden. Do you think Biden is listening, or is he just really ineffective and weak?
Well, we know that Biden's not calling the shots. We know he's being controlled, and you know, he's not calling the shots. Let's be honest about that. However, you know, I hear what you're saying, that some Republicans are trying, and you know, for me, it's hard to figure out which ones of them are really trying and which ones are posturing, right? Because, you know, listen, I like Ted Cruz, but going down for a photo op to the Donna facility, or going to a photo op to the convention center in Dallas and touring them, that's not stopping this situation. Okay. Now, the Arizona governor just, you know, told the National Guard to go down, and he declared a state of emergency. Right. I would like to see Governor Abbott declare a state of emergency here in Texas and not just send the National Guard, because that's been tried before. And they have a few National Guard down there right now, but that really means nothing. It's symbolic. We need the National Guard to have apprehension and detention authority so that they can hold the migrants for Border Patrol until Border Patrol gets there. And that's never been done, but that's what we need.
We're always hopeful for great leaders to, you know, implement good policies. When you talk about National Guard troops, again, back over in New Mexico, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham in 2019, I believe it was, pulled National Guard troops from the border and said there was no illegals crisis, that President Trump was making all of this up.
Yeah.
And if you'll remember, 3 months later, she was in Washington, D.C., begging for money for the illegals crisis.
Exactly.
You've been down there. You've been reporting for 3 weeks. Do we have an illegals crisis?
It's beyond that. I wouldn't call it a crisis. I'd call it a catastrophe. And again, I'm not a guy, I don't make things up or I don't exaggerate. I'm telling you what I saw for 3 weeks. And that is planes, buses, nonstop, a well-oiled machine. And like I said, and what's really worrisome for me, we interviewed like over 24 migrants at the airport, illegal migrants at the airport, before they got on the planes. We interviewed them, we talked to them. And what's concerning to me is that a good percentage of these illegal migrants, they had no clue where they were going to go once they got to the city that they had a plane ticket for. They had no address to go to. They weren't sure who they were going to link up with. And so if they don't know where they're going, how in the world, even if another administration comes in 3 years from now, how would they even begin to find these folks to begin the deportation process?
I decided just to expose my bald head because I was tired of seeing that. So now you will just see a glare. Anyway, so you're right. So the current administration, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, they're flying these people all over the country. We're not sure if they're COVID positive or not. But remember, Americans need to, you know, quarantine and stay home and wear a mask and really, you know, be careful. And we've had the economy shut down. What you're telling me is, and what you've seen, is that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are flying these people into all these cities. They don't even know where they're going. What happens to them then? Where do they live? Where do they find a job?
Well, and that's the humanitarian. That's the real crisis here is what happens to these folks afterwards. Look, you know, I believe in humanity, right? Like let's forget about the illegal part of them coming across, right? What I look, how in the world are you saying that we're doing something humanitarian for these folks? Well, we're taking them from a situation in their home country where they were exploited and they flee that. And then you put them into the exact same situation in this country where you're setting them up to be exploited. And that's exactly the way they're going about it right now. The way the Biden administration is going about it right now, by letting them just pour in, no paperwork, no court date, no nothing. These people, when they get to the city where they want to go, are 100% illegal. Okay. And now they're there by the millions, and there's all this competition for jobs. Well, guess what? Now people are going to come up to them and say, hey, we can get you a job, but you got to pay us 3/4 of your salary. Oh, hey, girl, you're good looking. You need to prostitute yourself for us, right? Or you need to sell dope for us, right? They're putting these people into the very situation that they fled from. And that's the real shame in all this.
And I'm glad, and thank you so much for exposing all these things. You know, whenever we talk about jobs, the Democrats who did not want ICE notified when illegals failed a background check to illegally purchase a firearm while already being here illegally, tend to be the ones to scream. In fact, it was Hillary Clinton who said, in America, no one is above the law. And we hear that a lot. And then when it ties to jobs, you know, obviously our organization, we're focused on American jobs. And obviously we want them to be for Americans. We've seen the largely Democrats, you know, use racism to say, well, you can't keep people out of the country. You know, we've seen CNN talk about the brown people, and that's what they've called them. And then it's, well, they need a job, and well, now they need childcare. Where does it end? And it, with millions of Americans unemployed right now, what is that outlook?
Well, I mean, look at just in the last 2 months, the extreme measures the Biden administration had to take to support the migrants that are just coming across right now, not to mention the millions more on the way. They've already had to offer federal employees 4 months of paid leave if they agree to take in migrant children, right? The Department of Human Services is calling foster parents and asking if they can take in one article, up to 20 kids for one set of foster parents, okay? Up in Dallas right now at the center, they're dealing with staff to migrant ratios of 250 to 300 to one staff member, okay? How are we possibly going to sit there and continue to handle this from a system, from an economy standpoint? It's impossible. We're not set up for this.
You know, we're not. And I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your time this evening. I want to hit one more thing. So today, representatives of the Biden-Harris administration in the talks with Iran on the nuclear agreement offered or expressed that they were willing to lift sanctions on Iran's oil industry as they continue to kill American jobs, right? That pause, like, I don't know what day number we are on that 60-day pause on new oil and gas leasing. And in fact, they said they wouldn't even issue a report until midsummer. As we're killing jobs here, we're willing to lift sanctions on Iran. Now, maybe it's about climate change, right? In fact, that's what the Democrats have convinced people, is that we're killing all these jobs for climate change, even though a study has shown that a permanent ban on oil and gas leasing in the United States would actually only reduce 1% of global emissions. But we've indoctrinated this base who, you know, they vote, oh, climate change, and the world is going to end in 12 years. And, you've been down at the border for 3 weeks. Last point I want to hit with you tonight. You've seen drugs come across unimpeded. You've seen guns come across probably unimpeded. We know that those things exist. Tim, tell me, if we get rid of American oil and gas jobs, will the climate change stay south of the border, or how does that work?
Well, absolutely not would be the short answer. It's funny that you bring up climate change because, you know, one of the articles I just read 3 days ago was the Democrats are now saying, oh, we're having this migrant surge because of climate change south of the border. That's why they're all coming to America. Now, how exactly that's going to help America with climate change, taking in millions upon millions of undocumented illegal migrants, who don't have jobs. Not sure how that's supposed to help our climate change, but hey, again,
No,
it doesn't have to make sense. It just has to make Democrat,
that's right. You and I, we're simpletons. We're arguing with people like the esteemed Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The same woman who said that unemployment is low because everyone has two jobs. And whenever we talk about her following, her 8+ million people who follow her on Twitter or Instagram or whatever. I can't keep up with how many kitchen apparatuses she doesn't know about, but she's an expert on climate change.
Yeah.
We're talking about an education difference. That's the challenge that we face in this country, is getting people to think. You talked at first about censorship. We've seen it on the platforms. Thank you so much for sharing your reporting from the border, and for just being able to tie all of these issues back to our oil and gas jobs and how they're all connected. I really appreciate you coming on and being with us.
Absolutely, Matt. And again, thank you for what you guys do, because again, it's important for our country. It's critical for our country. And I'm not saying this lightly. I got out of oil and gas in 2015 is when I left, and there was a little bit of a slump right then, and I kind of got out. But I'll tell you that in the years that followed, and it was so nice to finally hear that we were becoming energy independent from our enemies around the world, right? And to see the Biden administration now return us right back to that dependence, it's heartbreaking for me. And I hope that doesn't continue. I hope the oil and gas workers come together and stand up, and hopefully the politicians will support them to make sure that doesn't happen.
We appreciate you. Again, it's Tim Enlow, Enlow. Y'all look him up on Facebook. Tim, do you have if you've got a link or something you want us to share, send it to us, please.
I will.
And
okay.
Oil and gas workers, remember to join us at OGWAUSA.com. Oil and Gas Workers Association is fighting for American oil and gas workers.